The Turning Points for Families intervention is guided by the principles of Salvador Minuchin's structural family therapy. The fundamental philosophical principle of structural family therapy is Dr. Minuchin's concept of complementarity. By complementarity, Dr. Minuchin means that people in intimate relationships with each other co-create each other in a dance of mutuality and reciprocity. Think of it this way. People are most likely to change for those whom they love and for those who love them. In keeping with Dr. Minuchin's concept of complementarity, one may ask, who is the actual therapist to heal the child at Turning Points for Families? Two paths have the greatest potential to lead the way to reunification. The first path is led by the alienating parent, if chastened and cooperative due to the court order. In other words, the alienated child will flip on a dime to embrace the alienated parent should the alienating parent free the child from the abusive loyalty web that had required the child to reject the alienated parent as the price for saving a relationship with the alienating parent. The second path is led by the alienated parent, who is truly loved and coveted by the child, who merely requires a healthy environment in which healing can occur. These two paths complement each other, but the alienating parent is not always cooperative with the intervention despite the court order and the therapist's diligent efforts to gain their cooperation. Turning Points for Families places unqualified confidence in the alienated parent to heal the child and therefore initially anoints the alienated parent with the status of co-therapist and eventually with the status as therapist. The TPFF therapist thus serves as a catalyst to the alienated parent by providing the remedial environment for healing. The TPFF program philosophy is that no quantity or quality of words between the child and therapist, who is nonetheless a stranger to the child, can possibly have as powerful and transformative an impact on the child as do the words, emotions, and affection that are exchanged between the alienated parent and child. No therapist, however competent and well-intentioned, can possibly rival the intimacy of family relationships, particularly the compelling parent-child relationship. The central player to assume the healing role for the child must therefore be the formerly loved and loving alienated parent who is not only the holder of the family truths, but who has had the meaningful, loving relationship with the child. The role then for the therapist is to serve as a catalyst to the parent and child by providing the environment for the healing process to occur and by encouraging and guiding the creation of healthy, restorative interactions and experiences between the alienated parent and child. The viewer may be wondering, so how does TPFF meet the challenge of empowering the perceived vilified, abhorred, and spurned alienated parent to become the healer of the child? It's not mystifying to those who appreciate Dr. Minuchin's trust in the power of family therapy to heal its members. The TPFF therapist capitalizes on the child's survival instinct for a parent. We are hardwired to attach to our parental caretakers. In other words, because of our long dependency period, the need for a parent is part of the instinct for survival. The child's need and desire for the alienated parent has therefore only been repressed by the alienation, but it was not extinguished. Capitalizing on the child's compelling instinct for a parent cannot be overstated as an indispensable ingredient in the reconnection recipe. Clinical psychologist Paul Pearsall epitomizes this sentiment. Our most basic instinct is not for survival, but for family. John Bowlby compellingly addresses the infant's instinct for a parent in his publications on attachment theory, which affirms the child's first object relations to be the foundation stone of his or her personality. Bowlby declared, "I am taking it for granted that today we are all agreed on the empirical fact that within 12 months the infant has developed a strong libidinal tie to a mother figure. The child has a number of psychological needs which must be met, particularly for food and warmth. There is in infants an inbuilt need to relate themselves to a human breast, to suck it and possess it orally. In due course, the infant learns that, attached to the breast, there is a mother and so relates to her also. There is in infants an inbuilt need to be in touch with and to cling to a human being. And so accordingly, as the child's developmental stages become more complex, more stressful, more confusing, more unpredictable, more inscrutable, etc., the child's instinct for a parent surges in proportion with these surging survival predicaments. By joining with the child's instinct for a parent, the TPFF therapist facilitates the alienated parent's effort to help their children overcome their rejection, resistance, resentments, misperceptions, and defiance. The memorabilia intervention is a potent icebreaker of a child's resistance to the alienated parent. The memorabilia, to include video recordings, audio recordings, photographs, cards, emails, text messages, and all other types of mementos, arouse the child's repressed but compelling instinct for the alienated parent. The memorabilia intervention is the foundation and heart of the healing process at TPFF. The intervention was carefully conceived and choreographed to arouse the appropriate intensity and spontaneity to 1. Reawaken the lost connection between child and alienated parent. 2. Counter the brainwashing of the child to adopt a revisionist view of the family history and of the alienated parent. 3. Challenge the pathological enmeshment with the alienating parent. And 4. Restore healthy family hierarchy. By re-experiencing each other through the memorabilia intervention, the child and alienated parent recapture and relive memories of the normal, loving, and meaningful relationship between them prior to the onset of alienation. The memorabilia intervention sensitively enables the child to replace unhealthy, distorted, and fabricated beliefs and delusions about the alienated parent and family history with memories of a once positive, healthy, emotional, affectionate, and supportive relationship with the alienated parent. The intervention facilitates the reinstatement of healthy family hierarchy. A fundamental principle of family systems therapy holds that experience, not insightful dialogue, creates the most impactful, lasting change. The TPFF treatment protocol is therefore focused on the creation of new experiences instead of merely talking about having new experiences. Creating new corrective experiences commences with the memorabilia intervention and is then intensified by the daily activity of the TPFF intervention. The activity is not merely for fun. The activity serves as a vital therapeutic purpose. During the activities, the alienated parent is the sole boss of the child, perhaps for the first time in several years after having been shunned, disempowered, and denied a legitimate parental role. The alienated parent becomes the child's overseer, playmate, supporter, encourager, protector, consoler, and advocate. The TPFF treatment protocol expects alienating parents to write a letter to their children in support of the reunification. There are two principal goals of the letter. The first goal is to test the conscience of the alienating parent. In other words, the letter is an assessment tool to determine if the alienating parent is generally supportive of the reunification and is able to relinquish the offending, alienating behaviors. The second purpose is to free the child from the guilt for having maltreated and rejected a parent. The child being made to believe that he or she had made an uninfluenced choice to have done so. The alienating parent's behaviors are no better an example of visiting the sins of the parent on the child. It's truly an abusive act to perpetuate on the child who'll have to live with the guilt for an entire life if not fully exonerated. The letter is not a precondition for admission of the alienated parent and children into TPFF, nor is the letter necessary to a successful reconnection, but it certainly can be helpful to the intervention and to the child's emotional recovery. Ideally, an improved letter should be read to the child during the 4-day intervention. The issues requested of alienating parents to express to their children in the letter are 1. Genuine support for the child's relationship with the alienated parent and why. 2. the qualities the alienated parent has to offer the child. 3. The importance to the child of having the alienated parent meaningfully in his or her life and why. 4. Should an alienating parent have contributed to the making false allegations of child abuse against the alienated parent, then the alienating parent must convey to the child that the child is safe in the care of the alienated parent. 5. Should the alienating parent have placed blame on the child for having rejected, resisted, or maltreated their alienated parent, for example, declaring that it was the child's choice not to comply with the parenting plan and to maltreat their alienated parent, then the alienating parent must explicitly and definitively write in the letter that the child had not freely chosen to engage in such antisocial and cruel behaviors, but had been instead manipulated by the alienating parent to engage in the behaviors. It can't be overemphasized the importance of what alienating parents must convey in their letter. To exonerate their children from the belief that they are to blame for having maltreated their alienated parent, and to assure the children that they are safe with their alienated parent. To the contrary, alienating parents typically 1. Deny any responsibility for having incited their children against their alienated parent. 2. Suggest that the alienated parent had done something to cause their child's rejection. 3. Cowardly declare that they, the alienating parent, were only reacting to their children's complaints about their alienated parent and acceding to their children's wishes not to have a relationship with their alienated parent. For example, it's common for the program to receive letters from the alienating parent that state, "I should have reacted differently to your complaints about your mom or dad." Or, "I should not have jumped the gun when you claimed that your mom or dad abused you. I should have called your mom or dad first before filing a protective report." Or, "You need to give your mom or dad a chance in the therapy. Maybe they've learned something after all of this." Or, "This is an opportunity to let your mom or dad know that they do frustrate and anger you." Or, "I support the healing of your relationship with your mom or dad." Or, "Going forward, I know you'll be safe with your mom or dad." To the non-specialist in alienation, the alienating parent's defensive response, as reflected in the above comments, appears to be a mea culpa. But to a specialist in alienation, the above comments suggest plausible deniability. There's no clear acceptance for having initiated and perpetuated the alienation. Alienators instead heartlessly place the blame for the alienation squarely on the shoulders of the child. Talk about visiting the sins of the parent on the child. And the acceptance of blame has been bought by the child hook, line, and sinker. For example, in defense of their alienating parent, every child who's participated in the TPFF intervention spontaneously declared that their alienating parent had not influenced them negatively against their alienated parent, and that it was entirely their decision to reject, defy, and even physically abuse their alienated parent. The children further voluntarily elaborated that their alienating parent had always encouraged them to comply with the parenting plan and treat their alienated parent respectfully. Parents, however, are expected to require their children to maintain a normal relationship with other parents, just like they require their children to attend school, do homework, keep medical appointments, wear seatbelts, etc. It comports with the standard of best interests of a child for the alienating parent to assume full responsibility for the alienation and convincingly exonerate their children. Until and unless the alienating parent does so, the child can be expected to live with punishing guilt for the rest of his or her life. No child should have to carry the guilt for these behaviors. Although the alienated parent makes it clear during the TPFF intervention that it wasn't the child's fault, this doesn't sufficiently absolve the child of guilt. In consideration of the fact that all families are idiosyncratic, the TPFF program may request additional issues to be addressed in the letter. Issues that may have arisen as a result of the program's contact with the family members, including alienating parent. Alienating parents usually have difficulty writing appropriate letters. Many alienating parents have refused to write the letter, insisting that they would have to lie in order to respond to the issues being asked. Other alienating parents declared that they intend to walk away from their children and wait until their children return to them upon reaching majority. Still, other alienating parents simply failed to contact the program. It's the court's jurisdiction, upon taking testimony about the outcome of the TPFF intervention and the alienating parent's compliance with the TPFF treatment protocol, to rule on the lifting or extending the no contact period. TPFF has worked collaboratively with several alienating parents and their therapists to facilitate compliance with the TPFF treatment protocol in order to lift the stipulation for the no contact period as soon as possible. But as with any case of child abuse, the child's contact with an offending parent is dependent upon the parent's relinquishment of the offending behaviors. The ball's in the alienating parent's court. At some point, usually upon having gained insight from their therapy into their behaviors that had required a court order for the TPFF intervention, alienating parents are requested to write an apology letter to the alienated parent and child for the behaviors that had damaged or severed the relationship between them and which had caused them harm. Apologizing for the harm is required by the healing process. Meaningful healing can't begin by sweeping harm under the rug. It's appreciated that the apology letter has been misperceived to be punitive toward the alienating parent. The letter is not intended to be so, but is instead a necessary preliminary step to family healing. In her book, Sex, Love, and Violence, Chloe Madanes addresses the therapeutic necessity for apologies to take the form of a ritual as a symbol of contriteness and to remediate the harm done by a family member in order for forgiveness to be granted by the harmed family members. Quote, "Rituals are useful in marking the transition from one stage of family life to another, or to indicate a transition in a relationship. The drama of the ritual should be commensurate with the severity of the problem presented in therapy. Rituals are useful in marking the transition from one stage of family life to another, or to indicate a transition in a relationship. The drama of the ritual should be commensurate with the severity of the problem presented to therapy. Rituals are particularly indicated when people have to overcome very bad things they've done to each other. The ritual signifies that the past is over and that this is a new beginning. The more extreme the problem, the more extreme the ritual that the therapist devises. Rituals are metaphors that bring people together in positive ways. The ordeal is a strategy devised by Milton Erickson to make it more difficult for a person to have a symptom than to not have it. As with the other co-founders of the family therapy movement, Chloe Madanes was particularly concerned about the abuses of power which typically occur when healthy family hierarchy is disturbed. Madanes described these abuses as the ruthless striving for personal advantage. In her discussion of various corrective strategies for these abuses, Madanes declared, "The principle is simple: to make the consequence of the violence more unpleasant to the victimizer than to the victim. Forgiveness by the injured parties, according to Madanes, can be granted only after an appropriate ritual by the abusive family member is provided to the injured family members. This treatment intervention comports with the treatment intervention for domestic violence." The apology letter is an example of the remediation ritual described by Chloe Madanes. It facilitates the healing of all family members, but it's especially indispensable to the child's healing. How so? Here are the reasons. Number one, as we previously discussed, it's typical for alienating parents to exacerbate the harm to the child and alienated parent by declaring that they were only responding to their child's grievances, complaints, and even to fabricated child abuse allegations against the alienated parent, and by conveying that the alienated parent had caused the child's rejection. As part of the remediation ritual, the alienating parent must acknowledge ownership for having caused the alienation. 2. On some level, alienated children recognize that they had abused, maltreated, defied, rejected, and told appalling lies about a parent. Alienated children will have to experience a light bulb moment before they realize that they had been manipulated by their alienating parent to engage in these appalling antisocial behaviors. 3. Even though the TPFF treatment protocol requires alienated parents to pardon their children, the alienated parent's pardon isn't usually sufficient, although necessary. It's the alienating parent who has the irrefutable ability to fully absolve the child of guilt. 4. Humans learn by example. Seldom do we learn by words, if at all. Words are frequently ignored and readily forgotten. The best way, therefore, to teach children to take responsibility for their mistakes and mishaps is for parents to model acceptance of responsibility and provide apologies for their own mistakes and mishaps. 5. Should the child believe a false claim of child abuse, the belief must be corrected because the child has the same risk potential for post-traumatic stress disorder and other psychiatric disturbances as if the abuse had actually occurred. False claims of child abuse almost always occur in severe alienation cases. Severely alienating parents, in particular, very frequently initiate a false abuse report or have manipulated the child or mandated a reporter to make a false report. The false abuse allegations may be based upon the alienated parent's harmless parenting behavior or minor mistake, but which the alienating parent so distorts and exaggerates that the abuse allegation bears no resemblance to what the alienated parent had actually done. The alienating parent then manipulates the child to confirm the abuse allegations. Imagine the intensity of the child's guilt for having participated in causing the ensuing CPS investigation and for any consequences that may be imposed upon the innocent alienated parent, such as incarceration. Alienating parents must fully exonerate the child from having participated in these false abuse allegations by accepting responsibility for orchestrating and manipulating the child's participation. Although it may be difficult for alienating parents to assume responsibility for the role played in the false child abuse claims and to apologize to the alienated parent and child for having done so, doing so serves the child's best interests. A child can't develop normally if falsely believing that a parent had physically or sexually abused him or her. It is simply not sufficient to a child's healthy development merely to hear from the alienating parent that he or she is currently safe in the care and custody of the alienated parent should the child continue to believe that prior false abuse incidents had occurred. Although the TPFF intervention intervenes to correct the child's erroneous perceptions of the alienated parent, most often the alienating parent has the ability to convincingly and sufficiently correct the child's distorted belief system about the alienated parent and family history. The alienating parent's acceptance of responsibility for his or her bad-mouthing of the alienated parent and consequent apology for these behaviors go a long way to reducing the child's risk for potential major dysfunction across the behavioral, cognitive, emotional, interpersonal, and medical domains. Most importantly, the alienating parent's apology will sufficiently counter the propensity of alienated children to seek love in all the wrong places, and to engage in repetitive behaviors of entering abusive relationships because the erroneous abusive behavior is what the child knows, has experienced, and expects from relationships. 6. As discussed by Madonnas, it's an expectation in family therapy that there be an acceptance of and apologies given for family members' behaviors that have hurt or have violated the rights of other family members. Parents are expected to model acceptance of and apologies for bad behaviors so that their children are more likely to do the same. It's very difficult for alienated parents to apologize for their actual parenting mistakes given the context of having had to continuously defend against false allegations, of having committed horrific behaviors that frequently involve child abuse, child sex abuse, and domestic violence. When the alienating parent apologizes for having engaged in an array of alienating behaviors, alienated parents are more likely to accept responsibility for their parenting mistakes and provide appropriate apologies. Children need to observe both parents accept responsibility for their respective mistakes. It's surprising that the judicial and mental health systems have demonstrated reluctance to require the alienating parent to apologize for even extreme alienating behaviors which have subjected their children to psychological abuse and include antisocial behaviors. what a negative counter message is conveyed to children when the professionals in the judicial and mental health systems don't impose appropriate consequences on alienating parents for having failed to comply with the law, atone for having broken the law, and having made their children accomplices in breaking the law. It's shocking when professionals fail to confront alienating parents who model, encourage, and sanction antisocial behaviors for their children. Our responsibility to children, first and foremost, is to assure that children abide by cultural norms and expectations and comply with our laws. Peer-review research on the programs that have demonstrated consistent, successful reunifications for severe cases of alienation require a no-contact period between the child and alienating parent until and unless the alienating parent demonstrates that he or she is ready, willing, and able to support the relationship between the other parent and their child. The rationale for the no-contact period is, first and foremost, based upon our obligation to protect children, because a finding for alienation, at least moderate and severe, is simultaneously a finding of child psychological abuse. The no-contact period, therefore, permits the child to be taken into protective safety. As with all cases of child abuse, before permitting contact between the child and the offending parent must provide documentation to the court that he or she has successfully completed the appropriate treatment and has relinquished all abusive behaviors. Loss of custody should also be a routine response should a parent persevere in modeling, encouraging, or permitting his or her child's antisocial behaviors. There's not too many worse things a parent can do to a child than to encourage and permit the child to engage in behaviors that flout social norms, expectations, and values. Second, the suspension of contact affords the child an environment in which to A. Become extricated from the enmeshed relationship with the alienating parent, B. Be free of the demands of the loyalty web, C. Preclude the inevitable inquisition by the alienating parent about the child's contact with the alienated parent. D. Be receptive to investing in the alienated parent without fearing reprisals from the alienating parent. E. Be unfettered from brainwashing in order to absorb the corrections to the family's revisionist history. E. Be uninhibited to recapture emotional attachments to the alienated parent. And F. Become inoculated against brainwashing by any future nefarious influences. Third, protective time is needed upon leaving TPFF in order to persevere and enrich the reconnection. TPFF can't undo in only 4 days what has accrued during an extended time of brainwashing and separation that typically lasts for many years. Fourth, relapse is virtually 100% certain if contact is renewed with an incorrigible alienating parent. This is not only the finding of TPFF, but also the finding in other 2 successful reunification programs that require the minimum 90-day no-contact period. TPFF recommends that the no-contact period be lifted based upon the following conditions being met. Number 1. The child has sufficiently recovered and stabilized the prior normal relationship with alienated parent and has relinquished the manifestations of an alienated child. 2. The alienating parent has accepted responsibility for having caused the alienation, has convincingly absolved the child from the false belief of having initiated and perpetuated the alienation, and has affirmatively conveyed to the child that the alienated parent wasn't responsible for the child's rejection and maltreatment. 3. The alienating parent has provided evidence-based documentation that he or she has relinquished all alienating behaviors and is ready, willing, and able to support the relationship between the other parent and their child or children. The lifting of the no-contact period is therefore not automatic at the end of 90 days. TPFF is frequently asked why individual therapy sessions for the child isn't offered at TPFF. The primary reason is child protection. That is, because the alienated child invariably uses the individual sessions as a sounding board to vent the alienating parent's distorted, abusive family script, the individual session then continues to expose the child to the alienation, the very clinical condition for which TPFF had been court-ordered to remedy. In general, nothing is revealed in the individual therapy sessions other than the mimicking of the alienating parent's wishes, opinions, and feelings. Individual therapy sessions further exacerbate the child abuse by further subjecting the child to the loyalty web. There's no scientific support that verbalization alone has any therapeutic value. There's unfounded speculation that the alienated child won't speak freely in the presence of the alienated parent, presumably because the child's too fearful of the alienated parent to be open and honest. Although this might make intuitive sense, nothing could be further from the truth. The children who participated in TPFF had been so over-empowered by their alienating parent that they held nothing back as they forcefully and antagonistically expressed in a highly over-empowered tone of voice a laundry list of unsupported, bizarre, distorted, and often utterly fabricated accusations against their alienated parent. These children's words were reinforced by their dismissive body language, affect, and at times, their self-anointed freedom to violate their alienated parent's space. It would be hard to imagine that anything had been omitted from their exhaustive laundry list of complaints, especially when compared to the alienated parent's actual minor parenting mistakes. In the end, however, there were no substantiated accusations expressed by these children against their alienated parent, which had risen to a level that would cause an uninfluenced child to reject and maltreat a parent. Admission to TPFF is either by court order or by a parenting settlement agreement that's then approved by the court, with whatever terminology the court chooses to label and describe the family dynamics. The court order must stipulate the transfer of sole legal and physical custody of the child, at least on a temporary basis, to the alienated parent, and further impose a minimum 90-day period of no contact in all forms between the child and the alienating parent, as well as with any third-party co-alienators. All parties must be court-ordered to cooperate with the TPFF treatment protocol, which can be viewed and downloaded from the TPFF website, turningpointsforfamilies.com. As with any other case of child abuse, reinstatement of contact between the alienating parent and child must be guided by the standard of child protection that the alienating parent will not reoffend. The priority of treatment goals of the TPFF interventions is child protection. The second treatment goal is to help the child and alienated parent, including the alienated parent's extended family members who are almost always also rejected, recover their normative relationships prior to the onset of alienation. A third treatment goal is to inoculate children against future brainwashing and manipulation by the alienating parent or by any other potential nefarious influence. A future goal for an aftercare family therapist is to facilitate the restoration of the relationship between the child and a reformed alienating parent. Although it's a hope of the TPFF intervention for the child to have a healthy relationship with the alienating parent, effectuating that rests in the hands of the alienating parent, who must seek the appropriate services leading to the relinquishment of alienating behaviors. The TPFF program offers collaborative services to the alienating parent's therapist to facilitate the remediation and restore contact as soon as possible, should the conditions discussed above be met. One of the more alarming reasons that alienation is considered a form of child psychological abuse is that the alienating parent has been modeling, sanctioning, and encouraging the child's sociopathic behaviors. On this basis alone, there should be a finding of neglect against the alienating parent. There are few parental behaviors more devastating to a child than the failure to teach children to abide by cultural norms, values, and behavioral expectations. It's astounding that so many practitioners who intervene in these cases tolerate the child's maladaptive behaviors when interacting with the alienated parent, particularly in the therapy session, which is the very opportunity and environment to model and require socially adaptive behaviors. When the child's maladaptive treatment of the alienated parent occurs in the therapy session, it's not therapy, it's therapist-assisted elder abuse. Of particular note, the child is also disrespecting the therapist by showing such maladaptive behaviors. The uncivil and cruel venting of feelings is not productive or beneficial, and moreover lacks any scientific support of therapeutic value. If alienated children so treated their teachers, coaches, medical providers, or any authority figure, even peers, there'd be no question that the child is behaving in an antisocial manner. But when alienated parents are the recipient of such behaviors, the behaviors are tolerated by some professionals? How bizarre. All of us who intervene in these cases must require alienating parents to use their parental authority to require their children to stop engaging in antisocial treatment of their alienated parent. Written by Linda Gottlieb, the founder of TPFF, and produced by the Law Center. Click the link in the description portion of this video to learn more about them.